Good morning. My name is Jonathan Wood. I'm a staff attorney with Pacific Legal Foundation. PLF is the nation's most experienced nonprofit law firm dedicated to defending property rights, individual rights, and the Constitution in our nation's courts. The reason we're here today is this morning we filed a lawsuit on behalf of Andy Johnson against the Environmental Protection Agency, challenging an illegal and incredibly abusive compliance order issued against him. Andy Johnson built a stock pond on his private property. Clean Water Act expressly exempts stock ponds from its reach. EPA has no business regulating it. But that didn't stop the EPA from issuing a compliance order against him, accusing him of violating the Clean Water Act and threatening him with $37,500 a day in fines. In the year and a half he spent trying to explain to them that they've overreached, those fines are already approaching $20 million. The EPA's position is made all the more ridiculous because Andy's stock pond is environmentally friendly. It created wetlands, riparian areas, it's habitat for fish, wildlife, and migratory birds, and it actually cleans the water that passes through it. It's incredibly ironic that the agency that's right now in hot water for having dumped 3 million gallons of toxic water into a river is wasting its time and resources going after Andy for doing something that's actually good for the environment. So the way this is going to proceed is next you're going to hear from Andy Johnson to hear about his personal story and what this means to him. And then we'll turn it over to our local counsel, Dan Frank and Karen Bud Fallon, to give you a broader perspective on what this case means. So, Andy?
Good morning, I'm Andy Johnson. I'm here with my family today. I have Pacific Legal Foundation is representing us. We're filing suit against the EPA for the administrative order that I was given in 2012. Me and my family live on an 8-acre farm in Fort Bridger, approximately 300 people in that town. We have livestock, we have horses, cows, etc. that we raise on our property. All we wanted to do was to make a safe stock pond for our livestock. In the process of building that, we created a tremendous environmental benefit that now we have fish, we have wildlife, we have birds, everything that has come down and uses the pond. We applied for a stock pond permit in 2012. The state engineer issued the permit, signed off through Cheyenne. When we were completed with the project, we received a document from the state engineer's office stating that our pond was exactly permitted as exercised. We tried to do everything right. We were very responsible as we built the pond. It turned out to be an incredible benefit to the community, to wildlife, and to our stock. And we then were attacked by the EPA. They threatened me and my family. I have 4 kids that depend on me and a wife. I'm a regular old guy that works by the hour. My family depends on me, and when the EPA came into our life, they didn't just attack me, they attacked our family and our home. And we suffered many sleepless nights. We're still fighting the battle. The potential fines are upwards of $20 million. It's just devastating to think that our government, the country that we live in, that I work so hard and pay taxes to, is now attacking us. And I just want to say thank you to Pacific Legal for jumping on board, filing suit. Hopefully we can get this thing behind us. I'd also like to thank Dan Frank. He's been my attorney through this whole process, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Dan Frank. I'm the sole shareholder and owner of Frank Law Office, PC in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Andy called me, it's been a year and a half now since he called me and needed representation on an EPA administrative order that basically told him to take out the stock pond that he had constructed and notified him that he would be subjected to heavy fines. As we investigated the case, we found out that basically Army Corps of Engineers asserted jurisdiction over this little creek without ever leaving the office. They did what's called a desktop determination to say that they had jurisdiction over a creek that, had they ever gone out, they would have found that it dead ends in a canal and it doesn't ever reach a navigable water of the United States. To make matters worse, they have essentially ignored what's called the ag exemptions for stock ponds and said that Andy built an illegal pond and that he has to obtain a permit in order to do what should be an exempt activity as Congress wrote the law. So that's what we're bringing this action for the judge to tell the EPA that, number one, you don't have jurisdiction, and number two, this is an exempt stock pond, and that your desktop speculation and heavy-handed regulation that results is not going to fly in Wyoming. We're not going to let the EPA bully this hard-working Wyoming family, and we're thankful the Pacific Legal Foundation is on board to help us bring this action. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Karen Bud Fallon. I'm also an attorney in Cheyenne and owner of the Bud Fallon Law Offices. I got involved in this case when Dan and I were in Fort Bridger, and he took me to see Andy's pond. And after seeing that pond and seeing what the EPA is doing to this family, it made me so angry that I volunteered the services of my office to help this group. Doesn't it seem totally ridiculous that we have gotten so far afield from what this country was founded on? You know, I look at Andy's kids and I think about my own children and I wonder what we're leaving them. America was once a great nation, and the words of our founding fathers meant something. Remember what the Declaration of Independence said? It said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed." And remember why the colonialists fought the Revolutionary War? It was to secure the right of religious liberty and the ownership of private property. In 1772, a document entitled Rights of the Colonists perfectly explained the founding principle of this country. It stated, quote, "Among the natural rights of these colonists are these: first, the right to life; secondly, to liberty; thirdly, to property. As with happiness, this is not a right to property itself, but a right to use one's talents to acquire property and to use it as one sees fit, as long as it does not injure oneself or others," unquote. It is with this backdrop of the very foundation of this country that you should consider Andy Johnson's fight. Without the consent of the governed, as required by the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the EPA is imposing massive daily fines on an American family simply because the EPA claims to have authority to require a permit for a stock pond on private property. And even though by every account this stock pond is beneficial to the environment, the EPA is imposing fines even though the EPA recently dumped 3 million gallons of toxic arsenic and lead in the Animas River in Colorado, and just 5 months prior, the EPA caused lead, mercury, arsenic, and chromium to be dumped in the Oconee River in Greensboro, Georgia. At the beginning of my talk, I spoke about how this country was founded on the principle of the individual to work hard and acquire property to be used without government interference. You know, some years ago, I took a case to the United States Supreme Court to protect private property rights from abusive federal employees. At the time, my son, who was in the 5th grade, said, "Mom, you ought to just get the Supreme Court and the bureaucrats to read the Constitution, and then they would understand they can't do this." I think it's time the EPA took my son's advice. Thank you.
So I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning, both the many supporters of Andy and obviously the media.